Ahmed, both President Trump and President Erdogan saying they want better relations, but can they find some compromise on this issue of the YPG?
Recently, the Associated Press has published the Donald Trump policy toward Syria. And in that strategy, they state that it is classified into three main phases. The first phase is going to be defeating ISIS, and that's the #1 priority. After that, re-establishing stability in the region. And after that, the reintroduction of or safeguarding a transitional period where Assad is advised to step down. President Erdogan believes that Assad must go, but the problem between the two guys, who and how we're going to defeat ISIS. For the Turkish president, it is indispensable that we use the rebels on the ground, we use the Arabs, the Turkmens, but absolutely the YPG is a terrorist organization that cannot be used, and that's the problem between the two leaders. Now, for Trump, the most important thing is to mobilize all the region, all the allies in the region, whether paramilitary like the Popular Mobilization Front, Hashd al-Sha'bi in Iraq, or even the Syrian regime itself, Russia, other states like Jordan and even the Gulf states to reimburse the whole process and financially support it. So Trump is, from the one hand, is interested in defeating ISIS, having a landslide defeat, and declare to his own people that we're doing what Obama didn't succeed to do. But for President Erdogan, defeating ISIS shouldn't lead to another terrorist organization filling the void and having an existential threat toward Turkey by having this independent state. Because just think about Erdogan's mentality. If the YPG defeats ISIS, and then you have the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, you have the Euphrates the Euphrates River as a source of energy, and you have the petrol wells in the region. That means that already you have the sources to have your own independent state, and that would be a headache, or even rather a nightmare to the Turkish Republic.
Yeah, and there is this disconnect in how both nations view the YPG. The US seeing them as a more disciplined rebel fighting force on the ground, not equating them with the PKK, which is, of course, they do see as a terrorist group. So what then can the US do to ensure that the YPG does not become a direct threat to Turkey if it carries on this policy of arming them?
That's a very interesting question. I think the question is rather what Turkey can do to guarantee a different, effective, more powerful, combatant or alternative to the YPG. The United States believe that the YPG is the indispensable, most effective power that can push back ISIS. And that's true because the guys are successful on the ground when it comes to defeating ISIS in certain territorial regions. But on the other hand, they have unequivocal relations with the PKK, and that is a terrorist organization. And for Turkey, this is a matter that cannot be negotiated. We cannot allow this to happen. But the point, does Turkey have any alternative? Till this moment, Turkey seems to fail to convince the American ally that they're able to support them with a different alternative. The rebels on the ground are not sufficient from the Washington's perspective. The Arabs on the ground are divided. You have Ahmed Al-Burai in Al-Qamishli, and he pledged that he's going to fight under the banner of the Syrian Democratic Forces, and that's the YPG-dominated groups. So these are from the one hand. In Shanli Orfa, recently the tribes in the Arab tribes in the north of Syria, in Deir ez-Zor, they had a meeting and they all pledged that they're going to defeat ISIS. These people are supported by Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. The other Arabs are also supported by Saudi Arabia, but they're divided. And that's the problem for Turkey, that they did not till this moment show any alternative to the United States that they could be able. Though the Euphrates Shield operation itself, with the support of the Turkish army, was a kind of irrefutable success of Turkey in the region to push back all the terrorist elements in the region, and they tried to convince the American administration that this is the only way. You just depend, instead of depending on non-state militias, you have Turkey, and Turkey is ready to support you with all logistic military support, and they're going to go with their trained rebels to push ISIS back. And if they succeed to do that, I believe that the United States may take it.
Do you think Mr. Erdogan also has leverage, given that there are US troops present at Incirlik Air Base? Is that something that Mr. Erdogan could bring up?
Definitely, Incirlik base is going to be one of the thorny points. President Erdogan has many cards to negotiate with the Trump administration, but the problem with the Trump in general that his actions are much louder than his words. He said that Obama is the most terrible president of the United States, basically because he couldn't capitalize on the regional strong men, mainly President Erdogan in Turkey, and make use of the Turkish momentum against the war on ISIS and on terror in the region. On the other hand, President Trump was a big failure in the nuclear agreement with Iran. That's why when Trump came to the region, he came with a completely different, radical changing in the mentality, I mean the strategy he's going to use in the region. But when it comes to the ground and to the battlefield, he still has the same policies, and one rather thinks that Obama is still running the White House, not the Trump administration. Now, for the Incirlik Air Force Air Base, I believe that it's going to be one of the things that Erdogan and President Erdogan is going to use to convince President Trump that the only thing you have is Turkey as an ally, and if the long-term interest matter for the United States, you shouldn't lose Turkey, because it's very obvious that the president is completely annoyed and dissatisfied with the measures on the ground, seeing the soldiers of the United States escorting the YPG militias is not something pleasant for President Erdogan.
And just away from fighting on the ground, when it comes to peace efforts, the US seems to have taken a step back, or certainly is less prominent in ongoing peace talks, trying to resolve the Syrian conflict with a diplomatic solution. How much is the US hoping that Turkey is going to take even more of a leading role in that than it already is?
Rex Tillerson himself, he said, we are not, I mean, the United States is not in the business of reconstruction or nation building. And that's what I believe that Washington should placate or try to placate Turkey by offering them a role in the post-ISIS era. And that's why the peace talk, they're trying to save Turkey a role to establish the transitional period. But of course, in case the YPG is still on the ground and you have the Kurdish militias having the upper hand, that role is going to be as not useful, the same as what's happening in Mosul, because already we've seen the model in Mosul, how the Trump administration is going to defeat ISIS. They're going to push them back, but after that, who is going to be on the ground? The peace process in general is not going to succeed unless the regional powers, I mean the Iranians from the one hand, the Turkey from the other hand, and Russia are more involved in the process. Otherwise, I think it carries a plan B that is going to be enacted. And we are going to end up with the federal system with independent de facto cantons that are completely on different poles among each other. And that is going to lead to a more escalating tension in the region rather than de-escalating the ongoing conflict.
Now, clearly, Syria dominated the initial talks. Sides are now in talks at the moment. One of the other issues which is going to come up away from Syria is this issue of Fethullah Gulen, the man that Turkey blames for orchestrating the attempted coup. several times for this man's extradition. It didn't happen under Barack Obama's administration. Is Mr. Erdogan hoping for a better outcome with Mr. Trump?
The extradition of Fethullah Gulen is a must, according to Turkey, because they believe that this guy, he was the mastermind behind the coup attempt. That coup attempt that Turkey lost 250 people, innocent people were killed in Turkey. Had direct relations with this coup attempt. That's why they are still insisting that he should be extradited. But the point is, Donald Trump as well as Obama, they're presenting different excuses that this man can't be extradited, mainly because Turkey did not, so far, has not offered the United States with the unequivocal evidence that this man was the genuine mastermind behind the coup attempt. That's from the one hand. From the other hand, this would be a precedent where the other countries may ask the United States to extradite other opposition leaders that seek asylum or seek refuge in the United States. So it is difficult for them to have good terms, to come to an agreement on this part. But I believe that what might happen as a kind of satisfying Turkey from one hand, offering one thing, because you just keep in mind that Trump is still a CEO and he's a very successful negotiator rather than a statesman. He is going to offer something in return so that Turkey does not have a good deal on the YPG or regional strategy in Syria. On the other hand, they might have something with the Fethullah Gulen extradition. So he might be transferred. There are reports talking about South Africa, Brazil or Argentina. That might happen. And after that, Turkey may take more legal measures to try to have him turned over from these countries.
Interesting stuff. Ahmed Al-Burai, thank you very much indeed for that. Our editor-at-large in Istanbul there.